Alright, so here's another video for you noobs. There deploy .NET function, .NET Lambda function with container images. There are three ways to build a container image for a .NET Lambda function. Okay, using an AWS base image for .NET, using an AWS OS only base image, and using a non-AWS base image. Okay, so the AWS base images are preloaded with a language runtime, a runtime interface client to manage the interaction between Lambda and your function code, a runtime interface client to manage the interaction between Lambda and your function code. Runtime interface client, what is that? Okay, and a runtime interface emulator for local testing. Okay, so that's nice. So if you use the AWS base image, uh, yeah, if you're using an AWS base image for .NET, it will have the preload. It will be preloaded with language runtime like .NET runtime, a runtime interface client to manage the interaction between Lambda and your function code. So within the Docker container, there's a runtime there that is an interface between Lambda, the serverless Lambda within AWS, and your function code inside the Docker container, and a runtime interface emulator for local testing. So for local testing, there is also a runtime interface emulator within that Docker container. Okay, so if you're using an AWS OS only base image, so AWS OS only base images contain an Amazon Linux distribution and the runtime emulator interface emulator. Runtime interface emulator. So like this. So contains the Amazon Linux distribution and the runtime interface emulator. These images are commonly used to create container images for compiled languages such as Go and Rust, and for a language or language version that Lambda doesn't provide a base image for. So if it doesn't provide a base image like this, the .NET runtime, .NET AWS base image for .NET, so yeah, you will use the OS only base image. So for a language or a language version that Lambda doesn't provide a base image for, such as Node.js 19, you can also use OS only base images to implement a custom runtime. So if you want to have a custom runtime, you will use the AWS only base image. To make the image compatible with Lambda, you must include the runtime interface client for .NET and the image. So you will include the runtime interface client for .NET. Okay, so using a non-AWS base image, you can use an alternative base image for another container registry such as Alpine Linux or Debian. You can also use a custom image created by your organization. So make the image compatible with Lambda, you must include the runtime interface client for .NET and the image. So there's a tip to reduce the time it takes for Lambda container functions to become active. See, use multi-stage builds in Docker documentation. So what is this? So to build efficient container images, follow the best practices for writing Docker files. So this is for writing Docker files. So multi-stage. So like this, there's a from scratch. So there's another from here. So I haven't really dig into how to do a multi-stage on my Docker files that I myself has created. So I'm just copy and pasting Docker files for complex things, but for basic stuff, I am not sure, or I am not practicing this multi-stage yet. So for a Docker file, what is a Docker file? So yeah. We already know how to do that, but not in detail maybe. So this page explains how to build, test, and deploy container images for Lambda. AWS base images for .NET. AWS base images for .NET. These are the base images. Docker file for .NET 8 on GitHub. So this will be deprecated. So this is the one that is. What is this? So this is the Lambda entry. Okay. Using an AWS base image for .NET. To complete the steps in this section, you must have the following: .NET SDK. The following steps use the .NET 8 base image. Make sure that your .NET version creating and deploying an image using a base image. Alright, so this one here, creating the .NET. So we're going to create the .NET. Navigating to the my function. This is where the project files are stored. Example Docker file. Install the .NET Lambda tools. Payload testing. Alright, creating an alternative. So where is the Dockerization here now? Oh yeah, so this is the Docker file. Still machine deploy function. For everything, if everything is successful, you see the following. Hmm? Okay, wait.